A deadly virus accidentally leaked from a U.S. biochemical laboratory turns a squad of highly trained special forces into zombies, yet they retain their combat instincts, making their fighting power nearly unstoppable. Ironically, their longtime enemies, the largest Mexican cartel, are the ones now taking on the responsibility of preventing the zombie outbreak from spreading. So, in the end, which side will claim the ultimate victory? On a plain along the U.S.-Mexico border, a wild wolf discovered the corpse of a piglet and was about to feast on it when the creature suddenly opened its pale eyes. Moments later, a pack of vicious piglets rushed in from nearby and quickly tore the wolf apart. What had turned these once gentle animals so savage? In truth, they were nothing more than failed experimental subjects. Just 2 days earlier, Madison, a genetic research expert at a secret U.S. biochemical laboratory, was briefing members of Congress on the latest advancements in genetic studies. They had extracted specific gene fragments from the most aggressive insects, and if successfully developed into a serum, it could dramatically enhance a soldier's combat abilities. The project had already entered the most critical stage of clinical trials. When Madison injected the serum into the test pigs, it was clear the experiment had failed once again. Furious, one of the congressmen berated the project's leader, warning that the lab would be shut down if no progress was made within a week. The leader, in turn, placed immense pressure on Madison, reminding him that sometimes one cannot be too confined by professional boundaries. After all, the formula for Coca-Cola was invented by a pharmacist. These words sparked a profound inspiration in Madison. He was a drug addict in his daily life, so on a whim he began adding various illegal substances into the experimental serum. Unfortunately, all the test piglets still ended up dead. What Madison could never have imagined was that the following day, when their carcasses were dumped at a designated landfill along the Mexican border, every single one of them came back to life. It turned out that the genetic serum required a certain incubation period before taking effect. In other words, Madison's experiment had actually succeeded. After devouring the wolf, the ferocious piglets disappeared into the sewers without a trace. Madison, still unaware of this, refused to give up and decided to increase the dosage of illegal drugs for one last attempt. Yet the pigs died again, leaving him disheartened as he tossed their bodies into an iron cage. To his shock, it didn't take long before the pigs suddenly revived, unleashing tremendous strength that shattered the cage in an instant. They immediately began biting at their caged companions. Realizing what was happening, Madison hurried to find the lab director, excitedly telling him that the experiment might have finally succeeded. It turned out that the genetic serum required a period of incubation before taking effect, leading Madison to conclude that the discarded experimental pigs might also have revived. He quickly led a team to the landfill where the bodies had been dumped, where they discovered the wolf skeleton and then encountered a lone pig. Though it was just as ferocious as the others, Madison's team was well prepared and managed to capture it, intending to bring it back to the lab for observation and study. However, as soon as they returned, an accident occurred. A curious guard, fascinated by the resurrected pig, tried to tease it, only to have his finger bitten off. While the soldier was being treated, something far more terrifying happened. He began showing the same symptoms as the experimental pigs. His veins bulged violently, and he soon became abnormally aggressive. That was when Madison realized the serum possessed an incredibly strong infectious quality. Even he had never imagined that the thing he had unintentionally created would unleash a catastrophe upon the world. This man was the most charismatic criminal in Mexico's history. After spending 3 years in prison, he had won the unwavering loyalty of every inmate, and even the guards treated him like a brother. Everyone warmly called him Saul. But precisely because of his immense influence, the authorities decided to extradite him to a U.S. prison in order to minimize the threat. Today was the day of his transfer, and a special forces unit was assigned to escort him. Yet when they entered Saul's cell, they found only the corpse of a guard lying on the bed. Saul had secretly escaped nearly half an hour earlier. He had spent 3 years meticulously planning this breakout, gathering countless followers and digging a long tunnel beneath the prison. The escape went far more smoothly than expected, and Saul quickly reached an underground hideout where his loyal men had been waiting. Though they had not seen him in years, their devotion to him remained unshaken. Only his son, Jimmy, seemed conflicted. But Saul had no time to worry about that now. He ordered his men to get to work immediately. His plan was far from over. Together they installed a massive load of explosives, packed their things in haste, and pressed onward through the tunnel into the distance. No one knew how long they had walked before the group finally reached the tunnel's end. Climbing a staircase, they emerged into their destination, a secluded estate located deep in the wasteland, the perfect spot to avoid government searches. Everything had been carefully arranged by Saul in advance. Meanwhile, the special forces unit that discovered his escape soon located the tunnel entrance hidden beneath a pool and entered to pursue him. The passage was dimly lit, forcing them to proceed cautiously, but in the end they accidentally triggered explosives Saul had planted earlier. The squad reported casualties. Luckily only one man was killed, while the others suffered various injuries. Just then, the discarded experimental pigs suddenly emerged from the sewers and lunged at the weakened soldiers with terrifying fangs. Although the pigs were eventually driven back, every soldier had been bitten. It didn't take long before the virus took effect, sending them writhing in agony on the ground as their eyes began to change color. In moments, they had transformed into savage, bloodthirsty zombie warriors. Even worse, they retained their human combat instincts and remained fixated on their mission to hunt down Saul. Some of them clawed their way through the earth, following the scent with their heightened senses, and headed straight for Saul's estate. Tirelessly, they crossed mountain after mountain, attacking and slaughtering every living creature they encountered, sparing no one. A group of travelers happened to pass by and met a tragic end. The zombie warriors, driven by insect genes of aggression, worked together with ambush tactics and massacred them all, even the pregnant woman. Saul, still hiding in the estate, had no idea that disaster was already closing in. At that moment, Saul was troubled by his son Jimmy. Although the estate was well stocked with supplies, Jimmy was still just a child and constantly bored without friends his age. Saul had tried many ways to keep him entertained, but nothing seemed to work. This time, he bought his son a drone, and Jimmy was thrilled, happily playing with his new toy. Without realizing it, the drone flew far away, and the video signal grew unstable. Forgetting his father's warnings, the boy ran out of the estate, chasing after the drone. When he finally reached an area where the signal was clear again, he was shocked to see several figures on the screen running straight toward the estate. At the same time, one of Saul's men slipped out into the forest, pulled a carrier pigeon from his bag, and revealed his betrayal. He had been bought by Saul's sworn enemy and was now trying to send word. But before the pigeon could take flight, Saul, who had gone out searching for Jimmy, caught him and shot the bird down. The traitor panicked and fled, forcing Saul to order his men to hunt him down while he went after his missing son. The traitor, however, was cunning. He knew fleeing aimlessly through the wilderness meant certain death. After shaking off Saul's men, he doubled back to the estate and slipped into the tunnel Saul had once used. No one knew how long he ran before he heard movement ahead. Looking closely, he saw a group of grotesque, wrinkled zombies, though he had no idea they were actually zombie warriors hunting Saul. In the end, he became nothing more than their next meal. Not far above the tunnel, Jimmy was still absorbed in flying his drone when he spotted a distant figure. Innocently, he greeted the man, only to realize it was one of the travelers who had already turned into a zombie. Realizing the danger, Jimmy turned to run, but the zombie was much faster and closed in on him in seconds, leaping forward to attack. At the critical moment, his uncle appeared and shot the creature away just in time. During Saul's years in prison, it had been his brother who raised Jimmy, and their bond was especially deep. When he discovered Jimmy was missing, the uncle immediately rushed out to search and arrived just in time to save him. After pulling Jimmy to safety, he fired several more rounds at the fallen zombie, but it refused to stay down. Moments later, it rose again and tackled him to the ground. Jimmy rushed over to help, giving his uncle the chance to strike back, stabbing the zombie repeatedly in the neck until it was finally killed. But in the struggle, the uncle was bitten. Realizing something was terribly wrong, he urged Jimmy to run before collapsing in agony. Soon after, Jimmy found his father, who had been searching for him, and led him to check on his uncle. By then, the man lay motionless on the ground, apparently lifeless, and Jimmy broke down in tears. But suddenly, his uncle stood up again, grabbing Jimmy and lifting him into the air. He had already turned. Saul quickly raised his gun and fired multiple shots, only after a relentless barrage managing to bring the zombie down for good. At this moment, Saul sensed that something was terribly wrong. From his son, he learned that his uncle had been bitten by a madman and that several others were now running toward the estate. On high alert, Saul quickly raced back with Jimmy. This concludes the first 4 episodes of the series. With all 8 episodes planned, the groundwork for the story is now complete, and the intense, thrilling climax is about to unfold. As the zombie warriors draw ever closer to the estate, the question remains, will Saul and his men manage to escape once again?